Are you pre-diabetic and love red meat, but have you heard that red meat causes type 2 diabetes? We will separate the facts right here in this video. Some studies and headlines suggest a possible link between consuming red meat and an increased risk of developing type 2 diabetes. However, it's essential to approach this information with a critical mindset. Remember to hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and leave your thoughts or questions in the comments section below. You see, diets that aim for ketosis, like the ketogenic ones, often include a bunch of red meat. Now, they don't have to, but it just so happens that they often do. Now, different kinds of diets can help someone get into ketosis, like vegan, vegetarian, or Mediterranean diets. They can all do the trick, but keto diets usually have some meat in the mix. Here's the twist. If someone thinks that meat causes diabetes, they might steer clear of trying a keto diet or suggesting it to others. That's why it's crucial to clear up any confusion about red meat and diabetes. Okay, so about this study. It's like a super long watch over 30 years. The researchers kept an eye on lots of people, tens of thousands actually. They did this through something called the Nurses' Health Study, the Nurses' Health Study 2, and the health professional follow-up studies. But here's the thing from the get-go. It was all about watching, not doing anything to change what people did. It's called an observational study, meaning the researchers didn't step in to make changes. They just collected info from people going about their lives. This kind of study is seen as a bit weaker when it comes to evidence, especially when we compare it to studies where things are more controlled, like randomized trials or other studies where changes are made on purpose. But, and here's the cool part, this way of doing things allowed the researchers to keep an eye on what happened over 30 whole years. Doing this in a study where things are more controlled would be super hard, almost trying to catch 100 butterflies in your hands. So, even though it has some limits, this way of doing things helped the researchers learn a lot about a bunch of people over a long time. Cool, right? They checked how much red meat people ate and found that those who ate more had a slightly higher chance of getting type 2 diabetes. Using something called a hazard ratio to measure this risk, they found it was 1.6 for all red meat, 1.5 for processed red meat, and 1.4 for unprocessed red meat. Comparing these numbers to studies on smoking and cancer, the risk of red meat and diabetes seemed much lower. Typically, for a big impact in a study, the risk needs to be above 2, but here it ranged between 1.4 and 1.6. So, all in all, the evidence from this study seems a bit shaky. We're not super sure about it, and that's important to keep in mind. The paper is crucial as it reveals that individuals who consumed more red meat tended to engage in less healthy behaviors overall: higher BMI, more calories, less physical activity, higher smoking rates, and fewer multivitamins. Essentially, before increasing red meat intake, these individuals weren't in the best health. However, the challenge lies in the healthy user bias or unhealthy user bias. This implies that these people weren't very healthy even before incorporating more red meat into their diet. So, it's unclear whether red meat directly caused diabetes or if it's because these individuals were already less healthy. Additionally, the paper lacks information about their overall diet, whether they consumed a lot of sugary or processed foods. This is vital for a complete understanding. So, there's still much we need to uncover. Coming up later in the video, we're delving into the study's suggestion of swapping red meat for nuts, legumes, or fish to potentially lower the risk of heart disease. The paper dives into risk numbers, using hazard ratios to measure the risk. Initially, hazard ratios were around 1.6, but when considering BMI, how much someone weighs compared to their height, these numbers dropped from 1.1 to 1.2. It's akin to saying, let's think about how much these folks weigh and see if that changes the story. Well, It did. The risk numbers got even smaller. In essence, when accounting for weight, it suggested that red meat might not be as responsible for type 2 diabetes as initially thought. So, considering how much someone weighs makes the connection between red meat and diabetes seem even less likely. The study hints that replacing red meat with nuts, legumes, or fish might reduce heart disease risk. But don't get it wrong. The researchers didn't tell anyone to stop eating meat and start having these other foods. In reality, no one in the study changed their diet. There were no instructions given. The researchers tried to imagine what could happen if people did make that switch. They used statistical methods to estimate, kind of like guessing how many jelly beans are in a jar without counting them. It's a bit tricky and not always super accurate. So, when they talk about swapping red meat for other foods, it's more like a guess using numbers and math. It's not as trustworthy as actually seeing if people really made those changes. Alright, we just covered a ton of details from this study. One interesting thing is they counted things like sandwiches and lasagnas as red meat, which might include burgers or regular sandwiches. But here's the catch. With sandwiches come fries, chips, and soda, creating a connection to the saturated fat argument. In a nutshell, these studies grab a lot of attention with flashy headlines, but there's a question about whether they deserve all that hype. Looking at what this study tells us, it's like asking, how does this affect me? The study doesn't really show a strong connection. If someone eats a lot of carbs, red meat, and calories, they might get type 2 diabetes. But is it just because of the red meat, or is it everything they eat and how healthy or not healthy they are overall? We believe it's more about their entire diet and lifestyle habits. These kinds of studies, which just watch what people do without making any changes, don't really give us clear answers. So, if someone is using a ketogenic diet to help with things, they can feel confident that there is no strong evidence saying they're increasing their risk of type 2 diabetes. Even better, they can keep an eye on their own blood sugar, insulin levels, and other tests to see if they're getting healthier or not. We don't have to rely on this study, which is not very strong evidence, to tell us if we're making our health better or worse. In conclusion, our exploration into the question, will eating red meat cause diabetes, type 2 diabetes, uncovered a mix of findings. The study we examined hinted at a connection between red meat consumption and a slightly higher risk of type 2 diabetes. However, upon closer inspection, the evidence appeared somewhat shaky, with factors like overall diet and lifestyle habits playing a crucial role. If you found this information helpful or thought provoking, show your support by giving us a thumbs up. For more valuable health tips and to stay updated on our latest content, be sure to subscribe. Don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss out on our updates. Thanks for joining us, and as always, we wish you the best in your diabetes recovery.